Hi, I'm Lisa, and I'm the Donor Relations Manager for TLC. I work with a fantastic team there, and in addition to the work I do there, I'm also super interested in plant medicine and ethnobotany. Before I go any further though, I would like to acknowledge that we're filming this video on the traditional territories of the Wasanic First Nations. And I feel so grateful to be able to live in this beautiful place on their traditional territories and enjoy the bountiful gifts of the forest and surrounding sea. I'm really excited to share with you today how to make some plant medicinals out of common plants that are in my own backyard and might also be in yours. I have to say though, before we go any further, that I'm not a certified herbalist or ethnobotanist, so we always suggest that you seek guidance from an experienced mentor and learn to identify plants to the point where you're feeling super comfortable with it and you've had that expert advice to guide you. In addition to the knowledge that I've gained through workshops and working with mentors, I also always like to keep a few references on hand. One of them that I could suggest to you is the classic Pojar McKinnon's Plants of Coastal British Columbia. If you haven't got this book, I highly recommend it. There's just an absolute ton of information in there. And also, I really love this beautiful little set of cards that is the Pacific Northwest Plant Knowledge Cards. And they have great photos on the front and a ton of information on the back, as well as traditional uses of the plants. And these are put together by the Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities Indigenous Food Network, and highly recommend that as well. To get started, we're going to need to have a few supplies on hand. We need a small tin with a lid, or if you don't have something like this, you can also use an old cosmetics glass jar. Those would work well. I also have this sort of medium-sized one. These ones I've got from a supplier in Vancouver, so you can order those online, and there's probably somewhere in Victoria as well that you can order from, and I don't know throughout BC, but if you just do a Google search for cosmetic tins, I'm sure you can find it. Also this little spray bottle, we need a little spray bottle like that. We need some beeswax. So I really like to use these pastilles because they're super easy to measure, but you can also use the solid beeswax and just shave off the amount that you need. That works just wonderful. You also need an oil, and I happen to have avocado oil on hand, but you could just as easily use olive oil or coconut oil. Either of those would work really well. In addition to those, we also need a slow cooker, a double boiler, we need a Pyrex measuring cup. We need measuring spoons and some kind of a strainer and a mason jar with a lid. And I like to have a chopstick and a skewer for stirring. Today we're going to be working with 3 plants that grow really commonly in the Pacific Northwest. The first one is, and then we have Oregon grape, and the final one is plantain. The common name for this plant comes from the scent it gives off. So if you rub that little flower head between your fingers, it has just amazing, beautiful, sweet pineapple scent. And like chamomile, it has a relaxing and sedative effect. However, if you are going to use this, you have to make sure you don't have an allergy to chamomile or anything in the daisy family. If not, it makes a wonderful sleepy time tea for bedtime. The second plant that we're going to be looking at today is Oregon grape. And Oregon grape belongs to the family Barbaraceae, and I am using the shorter version of the plant today, Mahonia nervosa. This plant is fairly abundant in the Pacific Northwest, especially in second growth forests and mixed coniferous forests. I also picked some berries just to show you, and I don't know if you can see them from there, but normally these are beautiful, plump and round, about the same color, but these are completely desiccated from the drought that we've had this summer. So I'm not sure how much food that's supplying for the birds and the bears, but hopefully some. Oregon grape contains in its root and stem bark a very beneficial constituent called berberine. Oregon grape has a really long history of traditional use by First Nations. Um, the berberine has been used as a medicine, and the berries have been used as a medicine, a food, and a dye. They make a purple dye, and the inner bark of the root and stem that contain the yellow berberine will make a beautiful dye. So they've been used for a long time here on the coast. Sometimes people might get confused between Oregon grape and English holly. So just to show the difference, the Oregon grape, you'll notice the leaves are quite two-dimensional, and the English holly, you can see that the leaves go all the way around the plant. And if you look really closely at them, you'll notice the little spikes on the English holly are quite a bit pointier and sharper, and they're a lot smaller and more regular on the leaf of the Oregon grape. But again, if you're unsure, please ask an expert. So as I mentioned, the yellow constituent that's in the inner bark is berberine. And berberine has antibacterial, antifungal, and antiparasitic actions in the body and on the body. So internally, it functions as a bitter, and bitters are very important for boosting and promoting healthy digestion, and it can also be soothing to nausea and diarrhea. It has been said that it can help combat giardia, and externally, it makes a wonderful wound wash. You can wash an abrasion that you get when you're out hiking or something with it. It functions as a disinfectant and keeps that wound clean and heals it up. So the third plant that we're going to talk about is plantain. Plantain belongs to the family Plantagenaceae, and the one that we're looking at here today is common plantain, or Plantago major. This is the flower, which has a bunch of little seeds around it, and these are the leaves. Plantain is widespread throughout the world, and it's said to have arrived in North America with European settlers, and indigenous people in eastern North America noticed that this plant started appearing wherever settlers had traveled, and so it was given the name white man's foot. So plantain is antimicrobial and astringent, and it has been used as a medicine for centuries. In Gaelic, it's known as the healing plant, and Roman soldiers used to actually use it to heal their sore feet after long marches. Traditionally, it would be chewed, and then that's just to bruise the plant and release the healing properties, and then applied. So these are the three plants that we're going to be looking for today in the yard, so let's go out and find them. Remember, we want to harvest plants in a sustainable way, especially native plants. We will attach a link to this document at the end of the presentation, and you can have a more thorough read of it then. So the first plant that we're going to have a hunt for is pineapple weed. Pineapple weed likes to grow in gravelly, disturbed, and compact soils like roadways and driveways. So I have some here in my yard growing along the edge of a driveway that we don't really use. So you can see that it's quite low growing, and it looks a lot like the center of a chamomile flower, but without the petals. So we want to pick just the flower heads. We don't want to pick the leaves because they have a bit of a bitter flavor. So we're just snipping off the very ends of the flowers, and we're going to strip away any little bits of leaf if we happen to pick any of that accidentally. So once we've got probably about a tablespoon or two, we can make a beautiful cup of tea, the pineapple weed. So the next plant we're going to have a hunt for is Oregon grape, and Oregon grape is a native plant to this area. I'm really lucky to have a mixed forest in the front of my yard. It's really dry back here this year though. You can just see how dry everything is. And these plants are looking a little bit stressed from the long drought. I'm just going to show you a bit of the stem bark first. You have to pick off the outer bark, but if you do that, you can almost immediately see the yellow berberine underneath. Such a bright yellow. And then next we'll try to show you a bit of root. So you just want to unearth the soil gently with a fork, and then I usually tend to use my hands to finish the job, just gently exposing the root. You can see the root there, and you'll notice the outer bark here is a lot thinner and easier to rub off, and you can see the beautiful yellow berberine underneath. We'll just take a little bit of what we need today. So the next plant that we're going to have a hunt for is plantain. Plantain grows in disturbed soils, like along the edge of lawns and pathways. You can see some here in my garden along the edge of the lawn. And the ribs on the underside are one of the distinctive parts of the plantain plant. This is the flower spike, and you can see the little seeds on it. And it tends to grow in this circular rosette kind of pattern from the ground. We want to pick 5 or 6 of the juiciest, freshest leaves that we can find on the plant. This will ensure that we get all the beautiful healing goodness for the oil that we're going to make, which is step 1 of making our healing salve. So just pick leaves that look good and fresh and juicy. And now we're going to move into the kitchen with all of our beautiful plants that we've just harvested. Each plant has one of these information sheets, which we'll have a link at the end of the presentation, and you can download and print these for yourself. So I couldn't find my tea ball, so I'm using a refillable tea bag. This is my pineapple weed. We're putting it into the refillable bag, but you can use a tea ball, as I said. You want to get that in your cup, pour boiling water over it, and as soon as you pour the water over and you fill the cup to the top, you want to cover it right away with a plate or some sort of a lid to trap in those essential oils. We're going to let that steep for about, 5 to 10 minutes. I like it about 10 minutes just to get all the beautiful healing goodness out of there. So cover that up, trap those essential oils, and get all the benefits of the plant. That's it. Enjoy. So the next plant we're going to be working with in the kitchen is the Oregon grape. I'm going to be using stem bark for demonstration purposes because I already have some dried plant material on hand. But what we want to do is remove the outer bark, so you can see we're just scraping that off. Step 1, we're going to be shaving off the yellow layer. We don't want the outer layer or the white inner layer. Shave this thinly, dry it for about 24 to 48 hours, and then it will end up looking something like what I've got on hand here, and we'll be using this in our decoction. The next step is to make our decoction. I'm doubling the recipe here. I'm doing 2 cups of water, and to that I'm going to be adding 2 tablespoons of the Oregon grape bark. And you're going to want to bring this to a boil and then cover it, stir it in first, and then cover it and simmer for about 15 minutes on a medium to low heat. So we've made our decoction and cooled it for a little while, and now we're just straining it out, and you can see just the gorgeous, deep, rich color that we've managed to decoct out of that bark. So that's all the beautiful berberine in there that's going to be a wonderful wound disinfectant. So I just am pouring it into the little spray bottle I showed you earlier, carefully with the funnel. And I normally like to, after I've bottled things, I like to put a label on them. So it's a good idea to label it with what the recipe is, what's in it, and what the purpose is for. So the third plant we're going to be looking at is plantain, and this is a multi-step process to create our healing salve. So we're going to start by using the folk method. So this method doesn't involve any real measuring. I have some avocado oil on hand, and here's some of my fresh leaves. You could tear these. I started cutting them for the video, but you could just as easily tear them because we do want to bruise the leaves anyway to release the healing properties. So I'm just cutting these into my mason jar, and then I'm going to pour avocado oil over top using the folk method just so that I've covered the leaves. So this is just kind of doing it by eye. Then once they're covered, we're going to want to bruise them and start to release some of those healing properties. So I'm going to use my chopstick here and just give them a good press to get them starting to release the constituents that are going to be beneficial in our healing salve. So now we'll transfer this to our warm water bath in our crock pot and simmer uncovered for about 24 hours. Here's our oil. You can see the plant material is kind of brown and spent, and it's released all of its beautiful goodness into the avocado oil. It's a gorgeous green color. We're going to strain this.
Okay,
you could use muslin or cheesecloth and really squeeze out all the oil. I'm just using this little strainer. And we're going to press out as much of the oil as we can. And I always like to have my compost handy, and I will end up putting all of these things into my compost, all of my extra plant material. So yeah, you're just pressing out as much of the goodness as you can. And I'm going to try to show you how gorgeous this oil is. So the next step is to melt the beeswax. I'm doing 1 tablespoon of beeswax. I forgot to record the part where I milked in the double boiler, but this is the melted wax. And to that 1 tablespoon, we're going to add 3 tablespoons of our freshly made plantain oil. And it will harden as we're adding the oil, so you just return it to the double boiler to remelt it again. And then it's ready for pouring. And then we can just pour that right into one of the little tins or cosmetic jars that we have on hand, and let it cool. This will be our fantastic bug bite salve. So here we've created some great plant medicines just from plants that are growing right around us. So here we have our beautiful pineapple weed tea. Turned out really nice. And then I also picked some extra heads of the flowers and dried them out to bring with me on my next camping trip. It makes a great bedtime tea. And then over here, I've got the wound wash that we made out of the Oregon grape berberine root. And then also 1 tablespoon in 2 cups of water decoction as a tea for digestive issues. And then if you want to bring it with you in your backpack to decoct in the field, you can do that by bringing some of the dried root with you. It's nice and light for packing. And then finally, over here we have our plantain bug bite balm. So that salve turned out really nice, and you can just put that on your bug bites and blisters, and they will help heal them up. I really hope you all have enjoyed this medicinal plants workshop, and that you get out in your own backyards and neighborhoods and try out some of the recipes.